Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, my name is Desli Shahini. I am doctor in Albania, and my study is going to discuss brain development in Down syndrome people. To start about Down syndrome, it is very important as long as we are making such a big difference while we are discussing for the brain development of the people that are with Down syndrome. And I would like to start with the definition that means that Down syndrome is a genetic disorder that causes a lifelong intellectual disability, development delays, and other problems as well. The most important part of that we are going to discuss is about the neurological dysfunction. And we don't have to forget that a neural deficit in this syndrome suggests that Down syndrome affects late developing neural system, including the function of prefrontal cortex and hippocampus. To continue with the causes, human cells normally contain 23 pairs of chromosomes, as we know, from each parent, and three types of the abnormal cell division that involve in chromosome 21 are the trisomy 21, the mosaic Down syndrome, and the translocation Down syndrome. To say some few words for each of it, trisomy 21, it starts from fibroblast, and the trisomy 21 S cells that when it starts to develop into the differences that they make each copy of the chromosome 21 instead of the usual 2 copies, it has 3 copies. In all his or her cells, it depends by the gender. At the chromosome 21, we see the locus that change the target site, and it has the new trisomy 21 in the new individual with Down syndrome. To continue with the mosaic syndrome, we saw that even that is a rare form of Down syndrome, and they have extra copy of chromosome 21, but this mosaic of normal and abnormal cell is caused by abnormal cell division after fertilization into a mosaic type of creation. To continue with the translocation Down syndrome, that is uncommon in fact, but we still have children with translocation Down syndrome that have usually 2 copies of chromosome 21 and additional material from chromosome 21 into another translocated chromosomes that can happen before or at conception. When we discussed about the risk factors, for sure, one of the most important one, it is the advancing maternal age. By the age of 35, a human risk of convincing a child with Down syndrome is 1 in 400. By the age of 45, the risk is 1 in 35. So it is very important to know and to make sure that the woman at the age of 35 to 45 and up to 45, it's even more risky, can happen and can be one of the most risk factors discussed for the Down syndrome children. Having had one child with Down syndrome, especially about having the second one, may be and may go up further, raising the percentage chances of having the other baby, and also being curious of genetic translocation for Down syndrome. Both men and women can pass the genetic translocation onto their children. Symptoms of Down syndrome we also know, short neck, lack of muscle tone, different kinds of sizes that are totally smaller and lacquer of the tones. But what we needed to discuss and what we needed to know and to continue on more starts firstly with delays in development, seizures disorders, premature aging, mental retardation, also Alzheimer's disease we saw in different cases, and for sure congenital heart diseases and eye and hearing problems. When we saw the typical cell division of 46 chromosomes, as it is in the first pictures, we can make easily the difference of non-disjunction cells in the division of 47 chromosomes. The non-disjunction part, it can happen both in the meiosis part and after fertilization and mitosis, we see the 47 chromosome as it is in Down syndrome. Health in Down syndrome is totally indicated by three main risky factors and three main areas that are mostly involved, starting with the immune system that is very low, and to continue with congenital heart diseases, especially atrioventricular septal defect is one of the most founded in Down syndrome people, and to continue on with 5% of them that suffer from cataracts and glaucoma as well. But what we are going to discuss and to continue our study with, there are problems with the late developments and learning differences that those people may have, and to continue with seizures and sleep apnea as well. When we started discussion with people with Down syndrome, struggled to use totally a type of new creating memories, that function happens because the hippocampus part of the brain that normally creates those memory is a bit delayed and a bit lower in structure, as we see even in the picture. We have people that have trouble with learning, and they have very big problems on remembering such kind of stuffs, but they are very good in the remembering or storing the memory of the information that are linked mostly with colors or sounds that are partly related with the sensory memories that is totally coordinated by a different brain structure that is called amygdala. As the contextual and relational memories, we saw that hippocampal neurons receive norepinephrine, as we know, and form neurons into another part of the brain. As we see, this kind of part that changes and continue on the movement may provide an exaggerated developmental state, but we see that a longer time course, different kind of new diseases and new way of developing are facing and are upwards into the doctors that all the time follow up the developmental age and pediatric age develop. Some aspects of neural are altered prementally, and sometimes in postnatal development we see that there are reductions in number of the cortical neurons. That means that the granular layers, especially the layer 2 and 4, are alterated, smaller in size, and we see the myelinization that is totally delayed and altered. In our study, we have 101 children with Down syndrome. They are aged from 2 to 3 months till 5, 7, 1, and we found the evidence that the brain is normal in size and shape at the birth with a smaller portion of the diameter anterior posterior, but then when we measured after that in the postnatal development, we saw that it has a big difference on that. The smaller diameter was secondary to the reduction of the frontal lobes. As we know, the frontal lobes are totally reducted, and we see that at the birth, brain weight fell at the lower end of the normal range. By the months of 2 to 6 postnatal, 60% of Down syndrome people was below normal, and by the age of 2, 93% of them was outside of the normal range. As we see, this continues on like that till where it is the point that we found different neural microstructures that are increased in alteration because of the dendritic. The dendritic part has been found to be greater than normal, not only in the visual cortex, but prior to 6 months, they are dropping below after 2 years. Myelinization may be impacted in the late developing regions or fibro tracts, but examining brain morphology in those young children with Down syndromes, we see that the intercortical part of the fibers connect with the frontal and temporal lobes in a significant way. And this kind of interaction that they do and this connection that is created may differ in even a more delayed information of the brain and the development stage. When we see the delay in the myelinization and we discuss about the progressive delay, we can see that hippocampus and all the circuit that has inside the most important part when we discussed about the brain development in Down syndrome people, it is totally not only having different kind of missing connections, but even having lesion or genetic alterations that can give us more impact in how we are going to continue the pressure and all the kinds of impacts that we make to the brain development. And it starts from a very onset age as well. When we saw the magnetic resonance, we saw that Down syndrome people show a reduction in brain volume, weight as well, including reduced overall gray plus white matter. And what is it important in this topic is the small cerebellum, frontal and temporal lobes that are reduced in depth of the cerebral sulci, narrowing the superior temporal one. And this is very important because the way that they continue on reduction in brain volume and reduction of how they continue this kind of development gives us more power in order to make different kinds of stimulations to the brain for the children that have Down syndrome from the first months, because only in that way we can profit and we can go further to make someone that has Down syndrome more developed and more alterated in the memory storage. We try to get the brain function by examining a task with a semantic classification of the object, where we can find easily which is something that is associated with object encoding or object recognition. And we saw that the neural activity in the groups with Down syndrome was found in the frontal cortex, possibly reflecting something that is very semantic judgment, severe looking for. For that reason, in the age control that we make for the children that has Down syndrome, we are very interested in making and having the punctual age despite the physical age. We defer them in diploid TS65DN, and then while we make the encoding and we found which are the most important target ones, we saw that it is very important the escape latency that may go from the first into the 61 to the training days that go lower and lower. This is very important for us as doctors, but even for parents that needs to be all the time in touch with children and to work with them, especially with different kind of therapies that we suggest by being and by having the normal total distance from the diploid and from the other parts of it. The learning memory and having a speech in the Down syndrome, it is totally created in the frontal cortex. And as we know, it helps to get action for sure, to have good behavior, and as well to regulate attention. That is very important in children with Down syndrome. What is happening into what we knew as cognitive strength, it is that we have to profit from the parts that are very much more developed than we expected for. For example, they are motivated by positive reinforcement as well, and we have to motivate them for each small victory that they make. And the strong visual learners that are using visual clues, pictures, gestures that are very more important and essential in the memory that needs a Down syndrome child to be developed and not delayed, not stuck in that part, we are ready to imitate and reap rewards of joining it. While we make an early communication skill in Down syndrome, we found out that single words and vocalization are the most important steps, because those are what we firstly attract a lot of attention, and secondly makes them easily introduced into new environments. While gestures are important as well, but when we continue with multiple words, we saw that there are a lot of difficulties for them. Brain stimulation, it is very important, but it's not only happening by therapists, even by parents as well. We need it also to make the real diagnosis and to have the punctual early stage of introducing the therapy, despite the fact that sometimes new ideas may only say to us that I'll have to go further and to wait till it's going to be the moment that the child really accepted. Academic and cognitive skills, usually lower than adaptive or everyday skills, needed to be improved, as well as to protect the onset Alzheimer's dementia that actually happens 10 years earlier than general population. It is very important because it will prevent Down syndrome person from a very hard disease and a very hard situation, more than the other situation that needed to be passed during life, as well as diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular diseases, and low blood pressure are very well distinguished and very helpful during the therapies that we make. While we make the speech therapy, it is something that can be treated, as we said, in early stage, and the language stimulation, feeding, oral motor exercises, early language intervention are services that need to be not only introduced to our children, but even worked on by step in order to create what we know and what we expect by the brain development. As we know, the way that the mouth, the position of oral structures in a control subject and in a subject with Down syndrome are totally different because of the mandible and the lips that are in a lower part of the mouth, and tongues as well has an anterior posterior position. By knowing and creating in our mind this structure, we can create different kind of speech therapies that can help not only the oral structure to be well developed, but even the brain to create more security than the mouth is only what we tend to make, but in general, we create the brain development stage. While we speak for the characteristic of the speech, we are not going to expect something that is out of the brain delays that those people have. Many children have difficulties with strength, time, coordinating muscles, and having different kind of movements during the speech. But for sure, we needed to work with respiration, that is very important, with the voice, and that is totally structured by us, and with the production of speech sound. This is something that means that articulation needed to be well learned and well taught by us, because it starts from there, but it has a very good continue if we started the aspects from the first ages. And to continue on, the language characteristics has a very important impact in the way that they can express themselves. This is known as a gap in between receptive and expressive. Children with Down syndrome learn well through visual, so we can use a lot of visual stuff to get attention and to focus on language skills that we wanted to teach them. But working with the images and especially associated with sounds will be very good to help them to read words and to help to speech and to create the security that next time they can make another way of having new characteristics on their language and brain development by learning and by creating and storing those memories. For some children, it can be very helpful, even the expressive language. So we have even to be more curious and more creative when we start the speech therapy. And don't forget that every children is different from each other. When we speak about aphasia, we have two types of aphasia, the global one and the anomic one. We don't have to forget that global aphasia has different size and different location, but usually it's involved in left MSA, while the anomic aphasia has more partly related with injury happening in the temporal and parietal part. As we know, the global aphasia has a poor comprehension and repetition, but for sure they have new neologistic output, and it can be very fluent, even that is incomprehensive. So we have to work more in the comprehension part. While in anomic aphasia, we have the fluent and the good way of comprehension and repetition, but decrease of the output of nouns. So or finding words in the anomic aphasia, it's something normal, and we have to work well on that. So making the diagnosis, it is very important as well, but even will help the therapist and the parent to work in what is needed more in their children. We would like even to continue the researches, but what we needed to discuss in the next steps maybe is going to be the Alzheimer neuropathology that is very good related with Down syndrome, and we needed even to discuss the inhibitors of acetylcholinesterase, because it is very interesting to find out that those inhibitors may change the way that they get the information, they store the information, and then how they proceed to the next steps with the information that they get it. Studies are showing improvements in speech of communication, attention, mood stability, especially when we used donezepil. It is less significant, but sometimes it may have a new difference on that. So next step, maybe we are going to start and make what is adaptive behaviors with the using of the drug and the improvements that we are going to see in two differences. One, receptor antagonist is as well one of the most important questions, as long as we are still debating a lot which is a useful part of it and which is the part that needed to be skipped in order not to create more complications than goods. In conclusion of this study, overexpression of the genes from chromosome 21 shifts biological homeostasis and has new, less functional states. The speech had different distributions of these influences, and while we are looking about how to develop a child with Down syndrome, different cluttering like characteristic we found in the speech of young children with Down syndrome, none of them had been identified as cluttering, but the measurements and discussions about the brain development are particularly relevant in fetal and neonatal life. This is a life ongoing process, neural and glial proliferation, differentiations, maturation as well, but totally they are associated with constant fluctuations in the level of the brain metabolites. For sure, the brain development in the Down syndrome child, it is something that has no ending, as long as it will always make and create a lot of curiosity with different kind of steps and stimulations that we make. But most important thing is to create a stable and a label way of creating and expressing the new movement of helping the children with Down syndrome from the early stage with the therapies and creating a very good mood in how they will celebrate each victory with the more motivating stage to continue on. Thank you very much. I am very happy and glad that I was part of this conference, and for every kind of question, I will be glad to assist you. Thank you very much.